almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water.
Today we walk into this house with an iconic South African plant, the Alu Ferox. We must take the bitter with the sweet.
It is a matter that is under consideration. And all I would say is that watch this space.
Welcome to this week's episode of the SA Money Report. This financial podcast is brought to you by Fin24 and hosted by Deputy Editor Ahmed Arif.
As a nation, our hopes, our dreams, our plans for supper, and by and large, the stability of our economy are heavily reliant on whether we have energy or not. This is obviously top of mind while we're dealing with another week-long stretch of load shedding due to issues at Eskom's power plants. And instead of making this show sound like a remake of Groundhog Day where we relive the poor state of our power stations in Eskom again and again and again, we wanted to talk about investment. We want to talk about bringing hustle and bustle to Limpopo with plans for the Messina Mercado Special Economic Zone. But a nice big black economic zone like that, especially with lots of Chinese money involved, needs to have a reliable source of power. Hence, we're back to talking about energy in South Africa. Helping us to delve into the Special Economic Zone is SA Money Report regular Fin24 investigative journalist extraordinaire, Jan Cronje. How's it, Jan?
Good, Ahmed. How are you?
Good, Jan. So could you please explain to us what is the planned Messina Mercado Special Economic Zone? But more specifically, what are special economic zones and why the need for this one specially?
This story involves, as you say, special economic zones, which are essentially a type of specially designated area where the government says to investors, look, if you come here and build things and create employment, we will be willing to grant you special tax privileges. We'll help subsidize your bills. We'll smooth your way by doing things like cutting red tape. Such zones are fairly common around the world. South Africa only joined this global trend fairly late. In 2014 or so, Parliament passed legislation. And we have about a dozen areas designated as SEZs. You can think of them as a type of industrial park. Now, this specific one, the Messina Mercado Special Economic Zone, it's in Limpopo, quite near the border with Zimbabwe. And the proposal is for a zone of 8,000 hectares, split into two portions. And the Limpopo government, which is behind the plan, wants it to be the site of heavy industry with things like a coking plant, a steel plant, a ferromanganese blast furnace, and more residential areas. It's going to have a logistics hub. It's a big deal. And the state is hoping that it'll kickstart the province's economy, create tens of thousands of jobs, contribute to industrialization, etc., etc.
So it appears that the Chinese are very, very interested in this development. What's their involvement or investment in it?
So since 2013, when the zone was first proposed, there have been Chinese links to it. That year, our then Minister of Trade and Industry, Rob Davies, announced that a consortium of Chinese companies would be investing 40 billion rand into the zone, which importantly, they would then develop and manage. Now, I mean, in the early 80s, China pioneered the use of modern special economic zones. So I guess it's understandable that the Limpopo provincial government, may be trying to tap into that historical expertise. In any case, the following year, in 2017, a company called the South African Energy Metallurgical Base, which is a subsidiary of a Chinese headquartered company, was granted an operator permit to actually run the zone. So this doesn't mean that it owns the area. It remains in the hands of a company established by the Limpopo government, but it means that it can run it. And that was already 4 years ago. Nothing has been built yet, Ahmed. The land is still untouched. The first proposed stage to build a fence hasn't even been approved yet. But I think what's important for us is that people are looking forward to, what this industrial park may look like if it does get built.
So this whole economic zone, especially given that it's probably going to be a site of heavy industry, is going to need power. So what did an environmental impact assessment suggest was the best for the area? And what were the Chinese's original plans for that?
So there are many concerns for this area. NGOs have argued against the use of coal, saying it does not tie into South Africa's plans to lower our carbon footprint. But I mean, there are equally concerns around water. This area of Limpopo is very water scarce, and NGO groups and others have argued that there's not enough water for all this heavy industry to function. One proposal to overcome this would be the construction of a new dam to supply the area with water.
So with this proposed coal power plant, there's obviously been some concerns about that and the development on the whole. But more specifically, what's been happening from an environmental standpoint in terms of concerns about the whole thing?
So there are many concerns for this area. NGOs have argued against the use of coal, saying it does not tie into South Africa's plans to lower our carbon footprint. But I mean, there are equally concerns around water. This area of Limpopo is very water scarce, and NGO groups and others have argued that there's not enough water for all this heavy industry to function. One proposal to overcome this would be the construction of a new dam to supply the area with water, which has opened a whole new can of worms by people that are very much opposed to this new dam being built. So water is going to be a perennial issue here, in addition to what type of power eventually powers this plant if it gets built.
Yeah, and so clearly now, with Chinese President Xi Jinping saying that the world's superpower is no longer going to be constructing new coal stations abroad, is the plan for a powered fire station basically as dead as the SA economy at the height of stage 8 load shedding?
So the Chinese president made the announcement at an address to the UN General Assembly last month, and it would seem that this pledge directly impacts the plans for the proposed coal-fired power station. There are some indications that the company overseeing the whole thing is having second thoughts about coal. This week, the group that the Limpopo Economic Development Agency has appointed to oversee the special economic zone said that it warmly welcomed the announcement by the Chinese president, adding it is not a climate change denialist. It then told us that it was quite unfortunate that many have come to believe that the zone was, quote, dependent on a coal power source without justification. So, I mean, this seems to be an indication that plans for the coal power plant may be abandoned. It's certainly the strongest indication yet that we have that the coal power plant isn't a sure thing. What it will be abandoned in favor of, I don't know. As of yet, nothing has been officially announced, but we are awaiting to see what this company running it are going to say. They've promised an announcement fairly soon.
So, surprisingly, Eskom, who is regarded as one of the biggest polluting power companies in the world, is trying to go green. And earlier this week, Exxaro and Seriti, the two companies that provide Eskom with nearly 80% of its coal a year, said some of their mining operations would actually be powered by renewable energy and not the energy provided by burning their own products, which is crazy to think about. But spearheading this move to a renewable future is Eskom CEO Iterators. And Jan, he has weighed in on the whole plans for a power station in the special economic zone.
Yes, Ahmed, we posed questions around the area to Iterators. He didn't take a stance one way or another, but he was fairly critical of the chances that a coal-fired power station would be built in the current climate. And let's just play a little bit of what he told us here.
All I can say is good luck to the developers. As I said, you need to get an EIA. I think DFFE are likely to take their time and be very cautious. If that is granted, litigation is sure to follow from NGOs. Financing will be a problem. Insurance will be a problem. One would need to see how this fits in with South Africa's very public commitments backed by a cabinet decision to reduce its carbon emissions. So, I don't want to say yes or no, it's a good idea, bad idea, but I think that a project like that will face very significant and possibly insurmountable obstacles.
And there we go. Thanks for your time, Jan.
Thanks very much, Ahmed.
This brings our show to an end. The music in this episode is courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. This week's installment was produced with the help of Nomvelo Charumbira. Thank you for listening.